Everyone calls them reliable. Everyone calls them steady. They are the person you phone at midnight when your world is falling apart. And somehow, they always pick up. They say the right thing. They hold the space. They never seem to flinch. And when the call is over and you feel lighter, you probably do not stop to wonder how they feel because they seem fine. They always seem fine. That is the thing about them that the world gets completely wrong. It assumes that because they never collapse, they never need to. But there is a different truth running underneath all of that steadiness. Something that psychology has only recently begun to fully understand. These people are not strong because strength comes easily to them. They are strong because somewhere along the way, being strong became the only role that felt safe. They are the ones who carry everyone else, quietly, completely, and almost always alone. And today, psychology is going to explain exactly why. To understand them now, you have to go back. Not to last year, not to their last relationship. You have to go back to a specific room, a specific age, somewhere around 7 or 8 years old, where something shifted quietly inside them and never shifted back. Maybe it was a home where one parent struggled, where the emotional atmosphere was fragile, and a child learned very quickly that their own feelings made things heavier. That crying made a tired parent more tired. That needing something created tension where there was already too much tension. Or maybe it was more sudden than that, a loss, a divorce, a moment where the adults around them visibly cracked, and this child, this small, perceptive, deeply feeling child, made a silent decision. If no one else is going to hold this together, I will. Psychologists call this parentification, when a child takes on an emotional caretaking role that belongs to an adult. It does not require dramatic abuse or obvious neglect. It can happen in perfectly ordinary homes, with parents who love their children genuinely, but were simply overwhelmed. The child reads the room and adapts, and in adapting, they quietly abandon the part of themselves that was allowed to need. That abandoned part does not disappear, it goes underground, and it stays there for decades, waiting for a moment of safety that for many of these people never quite arrives. Here is the psychological mechanism that drives all of it, and once you see it, you will recognize it everywhere in your own life. When we learn as children that our emotional needs create danger, or simply go unmet, our nervous system adapts. It builds what researchers call a compulsive caregiving pattern, a wiring deep and automatic that says, other people's needs are real and urgent. Mine are optional. This is not a choice they make consciously. It runs below the level of thought. It is why they can spend 4 hours helping a friend through a crisis and then struggle to ask that same friend for a favor that would take 4 minutes. The incompatibility does not even register as strange to them. It simply feels like who they are. Research by John Bowlby on attachment theory shows us that when early caregivers are emotionally unavailable or overwhelmed, children develop what is called an insecure avoidant attachment style. They learn to downregulate their own emotional needs, to turn the volume down on their own distress, because expressing need brought no comfort. It simply went unanswered, and so they stopped expressing it. They became fluent instead in everyone else's needs. They became the person who notices when you are off before you have said a word. The person who fixes the atmosphere in a room without anyone seeing them do it. The person who holds the invisible structure together while everyone else lives freely inside it. But here is what most people will never tell them and what they most need to hear. That skill, that radar they developed out of necessity, is not ordinary. It is genuinely extraordinary. The attunement they built to survive a difficult emotional environment made them into one of the most perceptive, deeply empathic, emotionally intelligent types of people in existence. They read people with an accuracy that others spend years in therapy trying to develop. They can feel a shift in someone's energy before that person has consciously registered it themselves. They walk into a room and immediately map the emotional landscape. Who is struggling? Who is pretending? Who needs something they have not said aloud? This is not a party trick. This is a form of intelligence. And while the world rewards loudness and confidence and bold self-promotion, it quietly depends on people like this. People who hold the emotional fabric of families, friendships, and teams together without ever asking for recognition. They are the reason certain relationships survive, the reason certain families stay functional, the reason certain workplaces have warmth instead of just efficiency. Their presence is load-bearing, even when it is invisible, especially when it is invisible. But it costs them. And here is where the honesty has to come in, because this is the part that builds the most trust between us. Being the strong one costs something profound and specific, and if nobody has ever named it for you before, listen carefully now. It costs them their own grief. When something hard happens to them, a loss, a disappointment, a heartbreak, there is nowhere for it to go. They manage it. They process it quietly and alone. They do not burden anyone because burdening people has never felt like an option. And so, the grief sits inside them, compressed and unwitnessed, and over time, it gets heavier. It costs them their relationships in a particular way. The people who love them often love a slightly incomplete version of them. The capable version, the available version, the one who holds things together. The soft underneath, the frightened underneath, the exhausted underneath, stays hidden. And that hiding creates a loneliness so specific, it barely has a name. The loneliness of being loved but not fully known. It costs them their body. Research consistently links chronic emotional suppression with elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep, and increased risk of anxiety and burnout. The body keeps the score, as psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk famously wrote. It holds what the mind manages to contain. And for someone who has been containing for decades, the body eventually sends the bill. People look at them and see someone who has it together, someone self-sufficient, someone who does not really need much, and they believe that story because they have been telling it so convincingly for so long. The world takes their strength at face value and rarely thinks to look for the price tag. What people assume is that their composure is evidence of inner peace. It is not. It is evidence of long practice. There is a significant difference between someone who is calm because they are settled and someone who is calm because they learned that showing anything other than calm made things worse. The surface looks identical. The interior could not be more different. People also assume that because they never ask for help, they do not want it. This is perhaps the most painful misreading of all. They want it desperately. They want someone to notice without being asked. They want someone to look past the capable exterior and say, "I see that you are tired. Let me hold something for a while." They do not ask because asking still feels, in the deepest part of them, like the most vulnerable and dangerous thing they could do. Not because they are proud, not because they are closed off, but because the last time they were small enough to need something, the world was not ready to give it. There is a particular kind of courage in continuing to give when you have never been properly filled. In continuing to show up for other people when showing up for yourself still feels unfamiliar and strange. In choosing, again and again, to make the world softer for someone else even when no one has done the same for you. That is not a flaw. That is not codependency dressed up as virtue. Though those conversations matter too and deserve their own time. At its core, this is a person whose love is so ingrained, so habitual, so much a part of how they move through the world, that it has become inseparable from their identity. They did not choose this path because they do not value themselves. They chose it, or it chose them, because they understood, even as a child, that love was an action before it was a feeling. That somebody had to keep the lights on. That somebody had to stay steady so others could afford to fall apart. They have been that somebody. Quietly, faithfully, at great personal cost, they have been that somebody. And if no one has told them recently that this is seen, that it is valued, that the invisible weight they carry matters, then let this be that moment. You are not just the strong one. You are someone who deserved gentleness long before you learned to live without it. Someone who deserved to be held as often as you have held others. Someone who is allowed, fully, completely allowed, to put something down. And if this felt like someone finally read your mind, you already know what to do next.